El Gallo said that the creature was holding a severed human arm in its mouth. He clearly saw the forearm, wrist, and fingers. The most disturbing part is that, according to my friends, there had been reports of grave robberies in the cemetery. The tombs were open and the coffins had been disturbed by brute force. Some bodies were missing parts and others had disappeared entirely. Many believed it was grave robbers, but this creature we saw gave the events a much darker twist. These incidents had only been reported in recent graves, those that were still fresh or had not yet decomposed. According to the text, the authorities are supposedly investigating the responsible parties, or at least that's what they've told the families of the deceased, who are very upset about the situation. However, the authorities have kept a very reserved attitude, offering no information or updates on the case. It seems like they are ignoring what's going on. The press, on the other hand, says nothing because it's a small town in the middle of nowhere that barely appears on the map. My friends mentioned that rumors have arisen about it. One of them suggests that those who desecrate the tombs don't take valuable items. The locals are humble and it's rare for them to bury their loved ones with expensive belongings. It's believed that they might be members of some strange cult that opens the tombs and takes the bodies to use them in rituals. They might prefer bodies that are still fresh or in good condition, although this is not certain. Pure speculation. Another explanation was provided by Don Lupe, the cemetery caretaker, a 70-year-old man hired specifically to guard the site and deter possible grave robbers. My friends told me that one morning, Don Lupe was running as fast as he could, shouting that he had seen a monster in the cemetery. The poor man, who suffered from diabetes, felt very ill, so they went to find the town doctor, who stabilized him. He told them that he was in the makeshift cabin they had built for him inside the cemetery when he heard noises coming from the graves. Alarmed, he grabbed his flashlight and a tube and approached, thinking it was grave robbers. He explained that the first sounds he heard were growls, which made him think they had dogs with them. As he got closer, he thought he saw someone crouching in front of a child's grave, one that had been buried that same afternoon. Don Lupe took out the phone they had given him and called the police while pointing his flashlight toward the suspect. He shouted for them to leave, saying the police were on their way and that he was armed. However, with the flashlight he could see more clearly what was happening. He claimed it was a monster, a creature carrying the body of the child who had been buried in that grave. There was a lot of dirt around and a large hole in the ground. Without a doubt it had been dug up. He described how he could see the creature's horrible yellow eyes staring at him. With one jump, it landed on the cemetery wall and then made another jump outside, disappearing quickly. The man became very ill, suffering from a high fever, and kept repeating that the monster had dug up the child and taken him. Everyone went to the cemetery, but when they arrived, the police had already cordoned off the area. They couldn't understand how they had arrived so quickly, as in other cases, they took a long time to respond. They didn't allow anyone to enter, not even the child's family, arguing that it was a crime scene. When asked about what Don Lupe had said, they claimed it was all made up, arguing it was a hallucination due to his age. They even mentioned that the suspects had left their tools, such as picks and shovels, along with bags supposedly to store what they took from the graves. However, no one saw these tools and no one observed anything. The official version was that Don Lupe had surprised the thieves in the act, but they still managed to steal the child's body. Everyone in the town accepted this explanation. Not long after, Don Lupe passed away, supposedly due to complications from his diabetes and the emotional toll it had on him. He died as a liar, as no one believed his account. However, my friends and I are not convinced by what the police said. We believe Don Lupe was telling the truth. He saw the same creature we did, the one that digs up bodies and roams the fields near our village. To avoid problems, none of us has shared what happened, but here, under anonymity, I dare to tell the story. Some time ago, I was looking for an apartment to live in Morelia, Michoacán, as I wanted to enroll in a university that was only located in this city. My budget wasn't very high, so thanks to some contacts and acquaintances, I found a house in an irregular neighborhood in one of the most forgotten areas, but it had a curiously mysterious atmosphere. I arrived with my belongings on a Saturday afternoon. The landlady handed me the keys and explained how to close the front door, as it was crooked and needed to be forced a bit to close. She showed me the 2 rooms, a small living room and a dining area. The bathroom was filled with spiders and other insects, but I couldn't complain, it was what I could afford at the time. The landlady also mentioned that she had had problems with a neighbor due to noise, but that had been temporary. I entered my future room, opened the curtains and windows to let in some air, and right in front, there was another house similar to mine, which appeared to be uninhabited. Before I could take a closer look, The landlady abruptly closed the curtains and warned me that it wasn't good to inquire about the house across the street. She explained that an elderly couple and their daughter, who had a mental disability and behaved strangely, had lived there. Apparently they had moved to another place. I nodded my head and began to unpack. I didn't have much, just the essentials to start my life as a student. I decided to go out for a walk and explore the surroundings of my new home. I didn't feel discouraged by the house. On the contrary, I was excited about moving out. I returned a bit late. I had had dinner downtown and decided to walk back to save on transportation and enjoy the walk. I looked at my watch and it was almost midnight. I opened the door as the landlady had instructed, entered my room and got ready to undress. Suddenly, an unsettling feeling made me feel like someone was watching me. A chill ran down my neck and spread across my back. I even thought an animal had gotten into my clothes. I took off my shirt and checked, but I didn't find anything strange. I stayed silent for a few seconds and was about to take off my pants when again that terrifying feeling invaded me. It was an inexplicable sensation, as if I were suffocating, and I couldn't identify what was causing it. I then decided to check behind the window curtain. When I opened it, I could distinguish the silhouette of a woman with glowing eyes standing across from my house, not taking her gaze off my room. She seemed to be murmuring something, but I couldn't hear her, only saw her lips moving. My body shuddered once more and I stumbled backward. I quickly got up, but the woman was no longer there. The atmosphere around me suddenly changed and I felt a sense of freedom and relief that made me feel much better. That figure had certainly caused something strange, as if she was casting a spell just with her gaze. I tried to calm myself and closed the curtains so that the woman couldn't see inside my house. I tried to distract myself by thinking of other things, but her presence had left such a strong impression on me that when I finally fell asleep, I had nightmares where she was walking around my home, moving from room to room with a black box in her hands. I woke up startled even before dawn. I looked at the clock and it was barely 3:30 a.m. A new chill ran down my back, this time from a cold breeze. I turned in bed and terrified, I realized that the curtain in my room was open. I was sure I had closed it. I went over to close it and at that moment I saw her again. Her glowing eyes were fixed on me. I tried to ignore her, but something stopped me from doing so. With great effort, I managed to close the curtains, but as I did, I felt an even stronger chill than before. I covered myself with the blanket, trying to find warmth, and noticed that steam was coming out of my mouth. It wasn't that cold, but my room was freezing. I thought that must be the reason, so I moved to another part of the house. Interestingly, the atmosphere was different there, and I was able to sleep quickly. The next day I couldn't believe what I saw. The curtains were open again, but to my relief, there were no signs of the woman. From the house across the street, I knew I couldn't leave things like that, so I decided to confront the neighbors and talk to them about the woman who had been spying on me. When I arrived at that house, I knocked on the door several times but no one answered. After insisting for several minutes, a neighbor came over to ask me if I needed anything. I told her about the woman I had seen the night before and how unsettling it had been, but she assured me that the house had been empty for a long time. I remembered that my landlady had mentioned the couple that had lived there had moved out a long time ago, but I knew very well what I had seen. I didn't want to accept that I had had a paranormal experience, so I tried not to let my thoughts take over. The following days were calmer than the first. The chills had disappeared, and the woman had not appeared again. From the house across the street, I could see her pale face, barely visible between her messy black hair, her eyes shining brightly, fixed on me, and terror paralyzed me. I tried to scream, but she placed her hand over my mouth, and somehow took away my voice. No sound came out of me. She then placed her hands over my ears, and the world fell into an eerie silence. Finally, she covered my eyes with her hand and everything faded. The walls were full of humidity and scratch marks as if someone had clawed them. I stood up slowly and looking around, realized I was in the house across the street. Somehow I had ended up there, but I didn't remember how. Then the memories hit me like a wave. The bodies levitating in my home, the woman in white. I knew I had to leave as soon as possible. I tried to flee, but when I turned around I saw her. She was standing at the door waiting for me. I didn't know what to do. I thought about running or maybe facing her, but something in her gaze stopped me. When she began to speak, her voice seemed hypnotizing, as if I couldn't resist listening. She explained that she had lived in that house for a long time, that her parents had abandoned her when they noticed the strange behavior of the place. According to her, the restless spirits of the former inhabitants of the house where I lived were trapped there. Every full moon they were released, and no matter how hard she tried to control them, she couldn't. She assured me that her intention had never been to harm or scare me, she only wanted to help. She suggested that the best thing would be for me to move to another place, as that area was full of entities still seeking rest. At that moment, I felt my body freed from a pressure I hadn't noticed before. I asked her if I really needed to leave, but she didn't respond. In silence, I understood that it was for the best. That same week, I began packing my things and planning my move.